down, woman. Check.
We want to be respectful of everybody's time, so let's get started, please. Everybody, please take your seats. Thank you. Good evening and welcome. We're going to start off by hearing from our esteemed moderator.
Hey, good luck tonight. You guys have a killer presentation. I'm just going to introduce you, Adina, with a quick, we did a national search, hit the jackpot. Remember. No. Put that in writing.
Right. Here, right there.
Is it spelled Yoko like Yoko?
Yes. Okay. About now? Hello? Can you hear me? Better? Should I lean in a bit?
They may turn.
Okay.
They may control it. They're in.
Good evening.
Did you push it?
A little louder.
Welcome. Raise your hand if you can hear me. All right. Thank you very much. Welcome. Tonight's meeting is a new format for the city. There's a lot going on in the parks budget, and there are a lot of potentially affected interest groups in our community. My name is Frances Portillo, and I'll be moderating the session today. The city developed tonight's structure to give as many groups as possible an opportunity to speak directly to council. This includes Bureau advisory bodies, Bureau labor partners, and community members. We wanted to provide equitable access to council, and we did not want any one voice to dominate. For that reason, the agenda has two main parts. One, the Parks Bureau presentation, and two, invited testimony from a variety of groups representing interests across the Bureau. If you are not an invited speaker and your concern is not addressed tonight, we want to hear about it. We invite you to share your thoughts in other ways. We have an interactive visual wall for your thoughts and comments in the back of the room. Community members can also provide testimony online at portlandoregon.gov/CBO. And there are also comment cards at the information table. A little bit of housekeeping. Bathrooms are outside and to my left. And of course, there's coffee and cookies. Please enjoy. If you are hard of hearing or you need ASL accommodation, please let one of the staff know and they will help seat you closer to the ASL signer. Si necesitan ayuda en español, también tenemos intérpretes y pueden buscarlos otra vez atrás. At this time, I would like to invite up John Byer, the David Douglas High School principal.
No, we need you at the mic so we can do the closed captioning.
I'm not necessarily a microphone type of person, so I'm used to kind of speaking to large groups with teenagers and things like that without a microphone. But I would like to welcome you to David Douglas High School, home of the Scots, first of all. Wahoo! Do we have any Scotsmen in the audience? Grads? Oh, there's one. Okay, good. Awesome. Well, again, I know you, I'm going to be brief. I know you have some very, very important work tonight, but I wanted to let you know you're located in our North Cafeteria twice each day. This is bustling with about 800 very noisy teenagers with a lot of super energy, and it's a very, very exciting place. And I know that there's some important work and some great energy that's going to be here tonight. And so I hope that some great outcomes come from this meeting. I would also like to just acknowledge the fact that we're having this meeting in East County. And I hear, yes, having been at David Douglas now for 29 years, it's always fantastic to see our city government out here, and we invite you here anytime. We have tons of facilities and would love to have you here to see this wonderful place. And I would invite you all to come see David Douglas High School, the largest high school in Oregon with about 3,000 students, and the most diverse with about 70 different languages spoken in the school. It is basically a beautiful representation of how the world should be. Thanks again for being here tonight, and welcome to David Douglas.
Thank you. And now it is always a pleasure to introduce Mayor Wheeler, Commissioner Amanda Fritz, Commissioner Joanne Hardesty, and Commissioner Nick Fish. And we'll start with Mayor Wheeler, some opening remarks.
Well, I'll just be brief. First of all, thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you, Mr. Principal, for letting us use the David Douglas High School facilities. We are very, very pleased to be able to have this budget forum here tonight. No decisions have been made on our budget so far. I'm sure many of you around this table and in the room are well aware of the challenges we're facing. We also understand that people of this city are justifiably proud of and value their parks and recreational opportunities. We certainly share those values. Commissioner Fish is our Parks Commissioner. He's helped orchestrate this event tonight. This is a new format for us. We've never tried this before, and so we'll be very curious to get your feedback at the end of this. Did you think it was helpful? Did you think it was not helpful? Are there things that you would have changed about it? This is a bit of an experiment for us, and you're part of this experiment, but we wanted to try this tonight and see how you feel about it. So thank you for being here. Thank you for participating. I'd like to turn this over to Commissioner in charge of the Parks and Recreation Bureau, Commissioner Nick Fish.
Thank you, Mayor. Before we begin, could I ask all the Parks employees to stand so we can recognize them tonight and thank them for their public service? We are so grateful for the work that you do every day on behalf of our system, and so thank you for joining us. In September, the mayor asked me to lead the Parks Bureau, and as many of you know, the first order of business was to find a new leader, and in a little bit you're going to hear from Adina Long, who we selected after a national search, and quite frankly, we hit the jackpot, and we have an extraordinary new leader who joined us recently. I think she's in her 5th week. Would you please join me in welcoming Adina Long, the new director of Portland Parks and Recreation. And she didn't read the contract that I gave her carefully, but it's a 5-year no-cut contract. So we have long-term hopes for her and her leadership. After we did a national search, the next thing we did is we worked with our crack finance team. You're going to hear from Claudio. Claudio, please raise your hand, Campazano. And we did a deep dive into the budget. And with deep reluctance, we discovered a structural deficit, which you're going to hear about tonight. None of the proposed cuts that are part of the package we've presented are cuts that we wish we had to put on the table. Please, let's be respectful. But under the budget guidelines established by the council, we had to establish a balanced budget. Those were the guidelines that every member of council agreed to. That doesn't preclude a search for new revenue or alternative models, but our charge was to come up with a balanced budget. So we have made recommendations, and many of them we do with great reluctance. But tonight is our opportunity to hear from you, our key stakeholders. And if you have ideas for how we can get it better or do it differently, or maybe innovate or think about things in a new way, you've got the council's attention tonight, and we look forward to having that conversation. And Mayor, I want to thank you again for giving me the great honor of leading the Parks Bureau, and we are fully engaged in trying to get to a budget agreement with you and the council that is fair and that is balanced, and we look forward to doing a lot of listening and learning tonight. So thank you very much.
Commissioner Hardesty. Commissioner Fritz. Commissioner Hardesty.
He would call on me with my mouth full. Thank you all for coming out this evening. This is my neighborhood. I care about East Portland. I've lived here for almost a decade. I know that people out here work hard, and they care about this city. And it's reflected because you showed up. You could be doing something else tonight. So thank you. I look forward to our conversation.
And Commissioner Udaley was unable to be here tonight, but she has staff here who are also able and willing to listen. An overview of the evening, we're going to begin with an introduction from the Budget Director, Jessica Kennard. Then we'll have a presentation and comments from Parks and Recreation, the Parks and Recreation Board, the Native American Community Advisory Committee. We'll have labor testimony from PTE 17 and Local 483, and then the invited community testimony. Before we begin, I just want to remind people of the shared agreements that we've been working with in all of this process. 2 of them. 1, everyone has a right to share their views respectfully. That means that when we're the ones speaking, we stay on time. It means when other people are speaking that we listen respectfully. It's okay to agree or disagree, but if we could do that non-verbally in a way that they don't get tripped up when they're talking, because it does throw some people off. And everyone has a right to feel safe, that we get to say things in this room and we can feel safe as we're talking and as we're listening. So with that, I'd like to start with Budget Director Jessica Kennard.
Thank you, Francis. I have a PowerPoint presentation, if folks are able to pull it up. Good evening. Thank you for being here. I'm here to provide you with some brief budgetary contextual information to help strengthen and inform your engagement tonight and in the future. If you have additional questions after the presentation, I encourage you to go to the City Budget Office website, which is portlandoregon.gov/CBO. You can also email me directly at citybudgetoffice@portlandoregon.gov. Were you able to pull up that presentation? Great, thank you. Okay. So the city is responsible for a distinct suite of important services to the public, and we're comprised of 27 different bureaus that we organize into major service areas. You see on the screen are some of those service areas. So we have transportation services, including traffic, parking, streetcar, and road maintenance. Public safety services, which includes police, fire, and the 911 call-taking system. Community development includes housing and homeless services, planning and sustainability services, community and civic life, among others. We have public utilities, which is the water, sewer, and stormwater system, and then, of course, parks and recreation. Additionally, not included on this site are internal support services and our elected offices, which work behind the scenes to make sure that these public-facing services run well. So we're not the only game in town, as you guys know. We partner with our jurisdictional partners, our regional local partners, to deliver many services to the public. The county, which for Portland includes Multnomah, Clark, and Washington counties, provides human services, public health, libraries, district attorney, among many other services. The TriMet, as you know, provides bus, light rail, commuter rail service. Metro plans for the future in the Portland region and provides parks, entertainment venues, and services that cross city and county lines. Additionally, of course, public school systems are also very important jurisdictional partners. So what are we here to discuss? So the City Budget Office, the net city budget is approximately $4.2 billion, but the vast majority of these resources are what we call dedicated resources. So, for example, when you pay your water and your sewer bill, the city can't spend that money on just any service. We have to spend it on services associated with maintaining and operating the water and sewer system. So a good example for this in the Parks Bureau are the recreational fee revenues. Those are dedicated. Those have to be spent on recreational fees. When it comes time for budget decision making, most of our conversations thus focus on what's available to spend with very few restrictions, and this is what we call our discretionary resources, and those are the green bar on the right. So about 13% of our total budget is comprised of discretionary resources, and in this current year, that's about $566 million. So this chart shows how the city allocates its discretionary resources. You can see the large box there is our public safety services, again, including our police, our fire, and our 911 call-taking system. And that comprises over 50% of how the city is spending its discretionary resources this year. Other notable portions include Parks and Recreation includes roughly 12% of our discretionary spending this year, and community development, which again includes mostly homeless service spending and some planning service spending, among others, is about 11%. This year, all bureaus, in preparation for budget development, all bureaus were asked to build their budget with only 99% of resources. So what this meant was that bureaus received essentially their allocation of funding from last year. They received an amount for general fund inflationary factors, and then they were taken essentially 1% off the top. So what that bar chart is meant to show is that even though all general fund bureaus received a 1% cut, they actually received increased resources in the form of inflationary increases, again, just for the general fund portion. Separate from this guidance is the issue that we're going to hear about tonight, which is the structural budget deficit that was realized within the Parks Bureau. And so that's a $6.3 million structural gap that is largely in the recreational division, which is, again, relies heavily on recreational fees to support it. When our office and when council talks about our discretionary resources, we typically divide them into two types. available discretionary resources that we anticipate being available for at least 5 years, we refer to as ongoing resources. And these are the types of resources that we advise can be spent on ongoing programs, typically things like staff, things that we expect to be around for a while. This year, the City Economist anticipates about $1.7 million in available ongoing resources, and this is assuming that 1% cut that I mentioned in the last slide. In addition, there's about $14 million in available resource that we anticipate being available in this coming year, but we don't anticipate being available over the longer term. And so we advise council to spend these resources on one-time needs. And so these are things like fixing our streets, our major maintenance backlog, our infrastructure and our assets, or one-time projects. So this slide shows where we are in the process. The budget development process takes many months, and we're in the middle of it right now with these budget outreach events, which is the green circle in the middle. The mayor will be releasing his proposed budget on May 1st. Council will consider and vote on the approved budget in May, and then finally adopt the budget in June. For more information, as I mentioned before, please do visit our website. We have a wealth of information available there, and I do encourage you to reach out to me at citybudgetoffice@portlandoregon.gov if you have any additional questions or needs. I'm going to turn it over now to the Parks Bureau and Director Adina Long.
Thank you, Jessica. Many thanks also to Mayor Wheeler, council members, the City Budget Office, our Parks Board, and labor partners. I appreciate the chance to be here along with my colleague, Claudio Campuzano. I want to let everyone in the audience know that this presentation is approximately 15 minutes long. There's a lot of information to cover, and I appreciate your patience. I especially want to thank and acknowledge the community members who are testifying tonight and the community members who have come to demonstrate their love of and support for the parks and recreation system. As I've discovered in my first 2 months, we have amazing passion and ambition in the form of engaged stakeholders and committed staff, but we also have challenges. My arrival comes at a turning point for the organization. We've long been served by a robust planning framework for our long-term vision, strategic, and racial equity plans. All of these plans are due for a refresh, giving us an opportunity to re-examine where we are and where we're going. I look forward to working together to address these challenges and map a path forward towards a sustainable financial future to deliver cherished parks services. Equity is central to this work. We have focused on ending disparities and enhancing our programming using racial equity best practices. While there is still work to do, the results are clear. Our workforce is more reflective of the Portland community at 29% people of color. That's up from about 18% in 2014. Our programs, like Parks for New Portlanders and Summer Free for All, continue to expand our reach across the city and are more culturally responsive than ever. And with the opportunity to build more parks, we focused on the equity in contracting. Equity will inform how we address upcoming challenges and opportunities in both the near term and long term. As we move forward on this visioning work, I'm committed to making sure our aspirations are grounded in a resource plan that is achievable. That's why we're focusing on 3 foundational bodies of work: a financial sustainability plan, service level studies for parks and community centers, and a cost recovery policy to re-examine our fees. There are 3 sustainability challenges and funding shortfalls in the parks and recreation system: capital maintenance, operations and maintenance, and an operating gap based on our program fee dependence. Now our finance, technology, and property manager, Claudio Campuzano, will provide a brief overview of the parks budget and our challenges.
Thank you, Director Long. As Director Long noted, Parks and Recreation has 3 sustainability challenges. The first challenge, capital maintenance, is about taking care of what we have, old and new, so that our assets can keep delivering on their promise to the community. Capital maintenance is significantly underfunded, but as a city, we've been making strides to address it through the Parks Replacement Bond and additional one-time funding asks from the general fund. Through these efforts, we're repairing playgrounds and community centers in neighborhoods that haven't seen investment for decades and providing ADA access to park sites across the city. But as you can see, the funding shortfall between what we do invest and what we should invest continues. Closing that shortfall will require a long-term plan and long-term persistence in pursuing it. In the fiscal year 1920, we've requested an increase in major maintenance in accordance with last year's budget note. Our second challenge is related to growth of the system and the associated operations and maintenance needs. 1 in 5 Portland households does not have access to a park or natural area within a half mile. In East Portland, it's 2 in 5 that don't have access. In the last 5 fiscal years, the city has seen an upswing in development resulting in more than $140 million in park system and development charges. SDCs are one-time fees created by new development, and by state law, they can only be used to build new parks and facilities that accommodate growth. With this funding, we've added park capacity throughout the city, including projects like the new Gateway Discovery and Lewitt View parks in East Portland. But with growth comes responsibility. In order to maintain safe and sustainable parks for our community, the system needs funding to operate, maintain, and eventually repair and rebuild these assets. Council has recognized this and passed a financial policy that requires a funding plan for these costs and has been consistent in allocating resources for that purpose. This year, we requested almost $900,000 in ongoing general fund. Moving forward with our capital work without secured funding for operations and maintenance will perpetuate the funding gap. Specifically, failing to fund new ongoing operations and maintenance puts at risk the Bureau's plans to bring equity to East Portland and will mean further future cuts. And finally, the third challenge is an operating gap caused by our business model. Our operations are largely funded by a general fund allocation, but unlike many other bureaus, we are also heavily reliant on fees. For every dollar in cost, 73 cents comes from general fund, and 27 cents needs to be generated from our program fees, permits, and more. In recreation services, the balance is 50-50. We must earn 50 cents of every dollar from patrons. This dependence on revenue generation means that in order to create a balanced budget, revenue increases need to keep pace with cost increases. This hasn't happened, largely due to our responsibility to keep our programs affordable and accessible. Meanwhile, we are seeing higher costs in healthcare, cost of living adjustments, PERS, utilities, and more. The Bureau's requested budget for fiscal year 2019-20 totals $265 million across multiple funds, including capital and enterprise funds, grants, and our primary operating fund, the general fund. Capital money that comes from voter-approved bonds and system development charges and money in our enterprise funds is restricted and cannot be used for operations. That's why tonight we are going to focus on our operational budget, which consists primarily of general fund discretionary and fees we charge for service. This operational budget totals $92.5 million after proposed reductions for fiscal year 1920. Parks and Recreation's requested budget for next year includes the Mayor's direction for a 1% cut and closing the Bureau's operating gap. We are required to submit a balanced budget. Previously, we have used one-time strategies during the fiscal year, like hiring freezes, to balance the budget. This practice preserved some programs while at the same time weakening others. The projected budget gap at $6.3 million for next fiscal year is now too large for one-time strategies. Additionally, if we do not receive our requested operations and maintenance funding, the structural gap will grow to $7.2 million, and the park system's service level would decline, or we would need to have further reductions or realignments. Now I'll pass it back to Director Long for our fiscal year 2019-20 budget request and how we propose addressing these challenges.
Thanks, Claudio. As Claudio said, our budget gap is $6.3 million. To bring our budget into balance, we will need to make changes to our programs, our services, and our staff. When we cut programming, it impacts our ability to generate revenues. So we must cut expenses further to make up for that loss in revenue. Recreation's high dependence on fees means that the Recreation Division is the most deeply affected. We are making budget balancing recommendations, including reductions, with guidance from our Budget Advisory Committee's priorities of equity, safety, maintenance, and long-term financial sustainability. In addition, we leaned heavily on what we have learned from the budget equity tool, past budget processes, and other data. I do want to acknowledge our reality. In some cases, our values are affected. Now let's walk through the proposal division by division. The Land Stewardship Division is responsible for daily park maintenance, natural areas, sports fields, and more. With 94% of Portlanders reporting use of our parks, this work is centered on livability and long-term sustainability of our system. And with significant cuts to this division in recent years, we are currently at minimum staffing for managing the system. Our proposal results in less frequent mowing of non-athletic fields and a reduction in materials and services. We also propose eliminating transit mall planter maintenance, which we aim to transition to a partner. The Assets and Development Division is responsible for managing the Bureau's planning, capital programs, asset management, and park and facility repair. While a significant portion of this division's staffing is funded by capital projects, it also receives some general fund support, particularly for maintenance and repair. We aim to keep our central services team whole as we continue to struggle with a significant work order backlog. We have proposed reducing 2 staff positions, one in planning and one in engineering. The Urban Forestry Division is responsible for our urban canopy, our trees, including round-the-clock emergency tree work, permitting, education, tree planting, and more. Urban forestry has experienced significant general fund cuts in recent years. These have been offset with greater reliance on revenue. Resources have not kept pace with increased responsibilities and workload, resulting in slow service times and shortfalls in tree code implementation. At this time, we do not propose reductions. This slide represents our central administration, the Director's Office, Operations and Strategies, and Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement. These departments provide support to daily operations and strategic direction. These support functions have not grown as the Bureau has grown. In fact, this division has been significantly cut in previous years and is another area where we are facing workload challenges. Nonetheless, we have proposed eliminating 6 staff positions, including 1 customer service position, 2 positions in finance performance, 2 positions in the Ranger program, in addition to adjustments for seasonal Ranger staffing, as well as 1 position in equity, inclusion, and community engagement. We would also reduce spending on materials and services. And several community groups receiving pass-through funding from this division's budget, meaning their work is not staffed by park staff. We have proposed reducing their funding by 5%. In recreation services, the division most affected by reductions, we used the following criteria to evaluate funding proposals. The proposed budget strives to prioritize vulnerable and historically underserved populations, provide equitable geographic access, and prioritize the use of significant community investments like our large community centers, where we can generate larger revenue for a lower cost per customer visit. The budget also seeks to reduce deferred maintenance needs, minimize revenue loss, and affirm our commitment to arts and culture. In the requested budget, we propose prioritizing funding for programs that ensure access for vulnerable populations and achieving our equity goals. These include inclusion services, the senior recreation program, and summer free-for-all, to name a few. These programs have been under-budgeted and overspent in past years. Therefore, we have proposed reallocating $813,000 in general fund resources so these programs can continue at current service levels. To do so, we are proposing reductions in other areas of recreation services. The Bureau has proposed funding St. John's and Woodstock Community Centers at current service levels. Peninsula Park Community Center would be funded, however, there would be a reduction in staffing. These small centers serve historically underserved populations, or, in the case of Woodstock, are already close to self-funded. Recreation Services runs 5 large community centers. We are proposing broad changes to our operating model at these centers, which all run at a deficit. For example, based on our existing model, Southwest Community Center is nearly $1 million out of balance. When re-envisioning the model, we started with the base costs of operating the facilities with basic drop-in use, and then added in programs and services that maximize service delivery within a defined staffing model. This will allow us to better manage expenses. The proposed budget strives to continue current hours of operations, drop-in use of gyms, fitness facilities and pools, group fitness classes, swimming lessons, and more. The new business model proposes reductions of approximately $2.2 million, which accounts for revenue loss. As part of our transition plan, we are also requesting funding to continue 2019 summer camps and programming to keep the commitments for which people have already registered. In addition to the changes in the large community centers, our requested budget includes programming reductions. I'm going to walk you through these by program from left to right, outlining both what will continue to be funded in these programs as well as proposed reductions. In teen services, we propose to retain a staffed presence at the 5 Teen Force locations. Teen Force would continue to offer after-school activities, leadership development, teen council, and modified teen nights. At Montevilla Community Center, the focus shifts to preschool and Teen Force. The Teen Services program would reduce staffing and would align the hours of programming with peak attendance times, Monday through Friday. Partnership agreements with youth-serving nonprofits would be slightly reduced. Funding for gang outreach would return to the 2017-18 staffing levels. In addition, Montevilla Community Center would see staff and program reductions. Even with these reductions, the teen program would still be 3 times the size it was in 2015. For our urban parks, we would maintain current service levels for programming at Gateway Discovery Park. At Director and Holiday Parks, we would focus on rentals and eliminate staff coverage and the free art and culture programming. Finally, we've proposed changes in recreation administration. We'll keep and consolidate citywide recreation and recreation support systems. This reduction of 3 staff positions would require Recreation Services to reprioritize its operational and strategic capacity. We have also identified savings in restructuring the janitorial contract for community centers. We are requesting transition plan funding for summer programming at Montevilla Community Center as well. The following facilities would be most changed by partnerships, new operating models, or closures, and include staffing reductions. At Fulton Community Center, we are actively pursuing a partnership and lease. The partner would also manage space rentals. At Laurelhurst Dance Studio and Hillside Community Center, we would discontinue programming, and our team would actively pursue lease opportunities with the intent of continuing to provide public recreation benefit. If lease agreements cannot be secured, those facilities would be closed. In addition to lease models, we are looking at new partnership models. At Community Music Center, we would update the partnership agreement with Community Music Center, Inc., seeking a new sustainable operating and partnership model. At Multnomah Arts Center, we would identify a new sustainable business model that includes seeking new partnerships. Ongoing general fund would be eliminated. We are requesting funds to transition some of these facilities. Additionally, we would close 2 facilities. Selwood Community Center, and Columbia Pool, both in large part due to significant deferred maintenance needs. Selwood Community Center would close in September 2019. We are requesting transition plan funds for summer programming. Deferred maintenance needs for this small community center are as much as $8 million. At Selwood Community Center, our expenses exceed our fees by more than $300,000. And with this closure, we would reallocate this general funding to other areas of recreation. And Columbia Pool would close in July of 2020. We are requesting 1 year of funding to operate Columbia Pool and find alternatives for stakeholders like Rosa Parks Elementary, Portland Interscholastic League, Roosevelt High School, and the surrounding community. Deferred maintenance needs for Columbia Pool are as much as $5 million. At Columbia, our expenses exceed our fees by more than $450,000. And with this closure, we would allocate this general funding to other areas of recreation. Please note, the goal for this area of the city has long been to have an aquatics facility at nearby Charles Jordan Community Center. In total, the budget proposes 70 full-time and part-time positions reduced. 20 of these are vacant. 50 full-time and part-time team members are affected. This totals 56.06 full-time equivalents. We are working with the Bureau of Human Resources to provide support. This is part of a citywide strategy to give first interview opportunity to those affected by layoffs. We will be working to identify potential new positions for affected employees. And wherever possible, we will hold vacancies and take other steps to redeploy our affected team members to positions that have retained funding. With represented positions, we will follow the appropriate labor agreement and layoff and bumping process. These are very difficult choices, but without the expectation of additional ongoing general fund, the proposal before you is responsive to the direction we were given to balance our budget. But change takes time and carries risk. For that reason, as you've seen throughout the presentation, we have requested one-time transition plan resources totaling $3.2 million. These transition funds would mitigate near-term impacts on our customers who are already registering for summer programming. The transition plan funds reduce the risk associated with business model changes, and the funds will allow for the needed project management and community engagement to implement the solutions. In close, I'd like to again thank you all for the opportunity to present this evening. I look forward to hearing more from our stakeholders.
Thank you. Next, we'll be hearing from the PP&R Board, Pat Frobes and Jenny Glass.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Pat Frobes, the chair of the Parks Board. I'm going to talk for a few minutes about the board's deep concern.
Pat, can you raise your voice a little bit?
Okay, is that better?
Just a little more.
Better?
Yeah, it's a big room.
Thank you. I'm going to talk for a few minutes about the Parks Board's deep concern about the financial condition of the Parks Bureau and the urgent need to address how we fund parks and recreation services. Then my friend Jenny Glass and colleague, fellow board member, and also executive director of the Rosewood Initiative will talk about the consequences of failing to address these problems, specifically in terms of the city's obligation to create a diverse workforce and redress deeply embedded inequities in the distribution of an essential city service. The reductions in service, community center closures, and elimination of jobs reflected in the Bureau's budget request are extremely painful. Despite efforts to mitigate adverse impacts, they will impair the Bureau's ability to implement its 5-year racial equity plan and continue to serve our most vulnerable residents. As you know, the Parks Board is charged with bringing a long-term and citywide perspective to parks-related issues, and from that perch, several things are clear to us. The incredible legacy park system we have inherited and the ability of the city to build on that legacy to serve those who have been historically underserved is under an existential threat. As painful as the proposed reductions are, they must be implemented to stop the bleeding, but that's all they will do, stop the bleeding. The reductions will not solve the structural problem inherent in the way we have chosen to fund the essential city service represented by Parks and Recreation. The structure.
It will help if you do it visually because she's on a time limit and we want to make sure we hear everything.
And I want to make sure my colleague has.
Go ahead and show us with your hands. Go ahead.
The structural deficit built into the Bureau's business model has been with us for years, and it's either been ignored or papered over with one-time solutions. We no longer have that luxury. If we don't develop a new paradigm for how we fund our park system and address certain elements in the Bureau's cost structure, the Bureau will be forced to continue to cut services, defer maintenance, and eliminate jobs. City leaders over the years have not been transparent about the gravity or urgency of the situation. We must let the community know that if we don't change course, Portland's beloved Parks and Recreation system will essentially be dismantled piece by piece, year after year. The Parks Board is not willing to be complicit in the dismantling of what only 5 years ago was a gold medal system of parks, recreations, and open space. We need to start an urgent community-based conversation about how to restructure the funding of our parks and how to address certain aspects of the Bureau's cost structure. But those conversations will only be effective if we have your support and, more important, your leadership. Your leadership in making tough decisions to stop the bleeding, and most urgently, your leadership in finding a real solution to the underlying problem. The Parks Board stands ready to partner with all park stakeholders to help in that effort. Jenny?
Thank you, Pat, and good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jenny Glass, and I'm a proud member of the Parks Board. As Pat said, the budget deficit this year was as shocking and painful to the Parks Board as it was to many of the people in this room. Parks are public spaces that are more important than ever in a Portland with growing economic disparities. Parks make communities whole. Every resident of this city deserves a whole neighborhood with safe, accessible open space and affordable recreation opportunities. This city was built on those values, and there's growing research to show the positive impacts of parks on our health, safety, and even our children's educational outcomes. Investing in parks is an investment in the health and well-being of every resident in Portland. Even in the best of budget times, we have failed to deliver these essential services equitably across the city to people of color, low-income people, and other historically underserved communities. We were just beginning to make progress on Parks' 5-year racial equity plan, but this year we're taking a few steps back. We will not be able to hire and promote a diverse workforce. We will not be able to do outreach and engage people of diverse backgrounds living in neighborhoods like the one that we're in tonight. And we will not be able to provide equitable access to park services. There's no aspect of Parks' racial equity plan that will not be impacted by this budget. And we want to make sure that we do not fail the community again next year. The Parks Board understands that difficult decisions have to be made, but we're ready to work with you immediately on solutions. And this is not just Commissioner Fish and Mayor Wheeler's responsibility. This is your city, and we need your collaborative leadership. I joined the Parks Board because I live and I work in communities that are not well served by parks. But I was inspired by the commitment to improve access from community leaders like Linda Robinson and PP&R staff like Art Hendricks and Eileen Argentina, and the Bureau's commitment to racial equity. The Bureau now needs your commitment and your leadership, as well as your willingness to partner with the staff, the board, and community members that care deeply about their parks. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll be hearing from the Native American Community Advisory Committee, Katie Holland and Judy Bluehorse Skelton.
Shela, Katie Wa'unishi. I greet you all from the Celeste tribe, whose offices is right down the street here. These are our homelands as well as the Grand Ronde, and a homeland for many Native Americans in the city of Portland. And Judy and I are both members of the Native American Community Advisory Committee, and we've been meeting now since around 2010, 2011 with the city of Portland, because many of our community members, a huge majority of our community members, were not involved with the parks. And we came together, and we've been working together with the Portland Parks and to change that and to get our community members involved in the park. And we've been doing some really wonderful things, and we've done a PowerPoint, and Judy here will share this with you.
So, Tatsmewi, oh, there it is. I don't think people can read this, but who we are. As Katie said, we've been meeting monthly since 2010, and Portland has one of the largest Native American populations in the country and is home to many tribes and Native organizations. NACAC members include representatives from the organizations here, NARA, the Native American Rehabilitation Association, the Bow and Arrow Club, both very responsible and active for nearly a half a century with the Delta Park Powwow every Father's Day weekend on Nichiwana, the Big River, or as you call it, the Columbia River. We also have the Portland area offices for Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians and Grand Ronde, NAYA, the Native American Youth and Family Center, and I'm not going to read all, but PSU's Indigenous Nations Studies Department, and we've been meeting and advising and supporting a lot of the programs, and also consulting with Portland Park staff on, to culturally significant plants when they're looking at native plant palettes. We've been working with some of the ecologically sustainable land management staff as Parks identifies old parks that aren't working, no longer work as mowing and conventional maintenance, but are an opportunity for us to plant culturally significant edible and medicinal and other healthy lifeways plants, looking at a resilience to climate change, looking at a long-term sustainability within the park system that relies less and less on chemicals and other high maintenance, and looking more of a re-indigenizing the urban landscape. We've been involved in revitalizing and creating the annual proclamation for Native American Heritage Month every November, read in council chambers by the mayor. We have developed protocols around blessings as new parks are open, ceremonies for the recognition of sites as land comes back into healthy use. Katie and many others on the NACAC have served on countless committees for naming parks. Conomoxt Park coming together is a new one that's open. Our subcommittee has been involved in designing, collaborating, developing, and now co-maintenance agreement with the Cully Parks Native Gathering Gardens, a 25-acre landfill, and many other educating, advocating, and being present on the land as we look in the 21st century, how to live here in a good way for future generations. A couple of others, just some slides of the Delta Park Powwow. Is that the community gardens that the tribes have? The lower right is the opening of Conomoxt Park, the drums, the dancers, the Native American Family Day and Marketplace at Mount Scott Community Center. Also, we're getting ready to do our 6th annual, if you can believe that, salmon celebration at Westmoreland Park, when the collaboration between Army Corps of Engineers, Parks, Metro, and others eliminated the old duck pond and revitalized Crystal Springs, the headwaters coming out of Reed Canyon. And the very day it opened and we had the celebration, salmon were spawning in Westmoreland Park. traditionally prepared salmon, community members that bring their cultural knowledge and expertise and practice and share that willingly. We are all volunteers. We take turns rotating, hosting every month between our different partners. And, oh, well, we'll run out of time, but I think it's always important to have guiding values. Commissioner Fish's office has a copy of this PowerPoint, but these are the values that guide our work, remembering our responsibility to the seventh generation. I'm hearing a lot of that in the room tonight. We have to remember our responsibility and remembering our responsibility to land and the sacred, and that all land is sacred, and the reciprocity and interdependence of humans with our relatives, the plant world and the animals and the water that Portland today is sitting on. Cultivating healthy relationships, we are all related, and living, planning, developing, and managing for future generations. That's part of what NACAC is here to do. We're committed, continue to keep the relationship. We like being with the Parks Bureau. We recognize that a lot of bureaus are interested in this kind of indigenous land practice and these other elements that we bring. I will not, this is just some of the community engagement NACAC has done over the last near decade. This is for Cully Park. These were communities coming together, again, volunteering. We're looking at how to heal the land, heal the people, protection of knowledge, and reconciliation. Other guiding principles that youth and elders provided during that process for Cully Park: thankfulness. It's central to everything we do. You work with work with and learn from nature. Slow change is long change. We are here for the long term. And respect. Blessing ceremony at Cully, seed scattering. Overhead view, if you haven't been out to Cully, coming along. We engage so many community members, students, Native students, students from all communities, on site to plant and to practice and gather and dance. Other partners, we wanted to acknowledge that the work of NACAC has contributed to the city developing a tribal relations director, and we want to acknowledge Laura John's incredible work in elevating the conversation. Yes, thank you, Commissioner Fitch. It's really helped take some of the weight off the backs of communities of color and the tribal and urban Native community as we sit at this table and share our stories and be part of the future. I also want to applaud Parks. This Native American Community Advisory Council has attracted Metro, Bureau of Environmental Services, who recognize a shared vision in land and how to be here in a good way as we recover what we call recover from discovery, the recovery of discovery. And so getting out again, harvesting camas, doing a traditional pit roasting on land. Also, finally, a reminder, NACAC has worked with Parks and the city on everything from commemorating our indigenous artists with artwork like this piece that was just installed 2 years ago by Warm Springs artist Lillian Pitt down on the South Waterfront Park. Being out there with Lillian down there when she was thinking about what to do and looking out across the Willamette at Ross Island, Lillian said, "Oh, Judy, I said, there's eagles nesting there." She said, "River Guardian, we need a river guardian." And she entitled this 9-foot sculpture, River Guardian, looking over the people. I want to recognize that we appreciate the work and equity and inclusion that the bureaus are doing, but we invite you to not just keep us there. We are throughout, integrate us fully throughout city government at all levels, not just under one title of equity and inclusion. We're a diverse group, and all the marginalized and historically marginalized communities have a bigger role to play. So, Katsiaoyao, thank you. How do you say it?
Thank you.
Okay. So, thank you, everyone.
And next, we'll be hearing from PTE representative and I did not get your names, so please.
Hi, thank you. Good evening. My name is Rachel Whiteside, and I'm gonna...
Rachel, move it a little closer so we can hear you.
I can hear me. Ooh. Good evening. My name is Rachel Whiteside. I'm union representative for professional and technical employees at the Parks Bureau as well as throughout the city. And we're here tonight because we have grave concerns that the proposed cuts would not succeed in creating a sustainable budget in the long term and are rather just a short-term fix that fail to address the larger systemic challenges. With me tonight is Parks employee Yoko Silk and labor representative from the Budget Advisory Committee, and she's going to be presenting some of our ideas and concerns regarding the budget deficit and specifically how they relate to staff retention, community accessibility, and long-term sustainability.
Thank you, Rachel. So to be clear, I'm actually going to pass these letters down. I think there's 8 copies left, so most of you can have them. This letter is written on behalf of the 4 employees who sit on the Budget Advisory Committee. And first off, I want to commend all the volunteers who are on the Budget Advisory Committee. Everybody is really dedicated and thoughtful and wants to see Portland Parks and Recreation thrive. We did feel, as the only labor who sit on the committee, the only staff who actually sit on the committee, we had specific concerns that we wanted to bring up. First, acknowledging there's a huge deficit and there's going to be a lot of tough decisions. But we've seen that, like Rachel said, we don't see this being a long-term solution. This seems to be a short-term fix a short-term fix to a larger systemic challenge. That really has been created, like Claudio said, on an over-reliance on revenue generation tactics. So we really hope that the City Council will support efforts to address this greater issue and reduce requirements of revenue generation for specific programs and ensure that any cuts that are taken are truly a step towards a more sustainable budget. We also have concerns that the cuts being proposed are largely shouldered on the backs of labor and staff, 70 positions affected in whole. The benefits and positive influence of Portland Park Recreation obviously touch everyone in the community, and we just want to remind City Council of that our budget should not just be counted for Portland Parks, that our budget actually impacts the workload on the Police Bureau with our gang outreach program and our teen programs, and it engages environmental education, and it affects the health of all of our residents, like Jenny was mentioning. So it's a broad-reaching budget. We want to make sure that everybody's aware of that, as you probably are. If reductions are taken this year, we ask for ingenuity and creativity so that the reductions can retain as many staff as possible, keep our programs and services accessible to all Portlanders, and affirm the Bureau's commitment to the 5-year racial equity plan. The Bureau's 5-year racial equity plan runs through 2021, and it states clear objectives and performance measures for increasing diversity of full-time staff with PP&R. Since the recreation arbitration last year, we've made really good progress. Our employee base has expanded positively in skills and diversity, and 37% of the employees hired in the arbitration were people of color, which meets the Racial Equity Plan's Bureau performance measure that stated in 2.1.A, 35% of recreation arbitration hires are people of color. If the recreation budget is required to address as large of a budget deficit as it's been proposed, many of these employees of color will lose their employment because they don't have seniority, even though they've been working with parks many times for many, many years as part-time employees, but you don't get seniority as a part-time employee. We are at risk of not fulfilling that performance measure of the racial equity plan. The arbitration has really moved the needle in a significant way towards equity in our staff. However, we are in danger of losing that progress if these employees are let go because of their lack of seniority. If reductions must be made, please do everything in your power to create new positions and fill vacancies with these staff, looking citywide, not just Bureau-wide. Please ensure that the Bureau doesn't take a step backwards from the progress made towards equity, and really, the values and objectives stated in the Racial Equity Plan, if they are truly values that the Bureau holds, they should not and cannot be adjusted to address a budget deficit. In fact, it should go the other way around. The budget should be adjusted to address the value, or to meet the values. When considering closing or selling any property or eliminating any program, please minimize the impacts to the workforce. Fill current vacancies across the Bureau, throughout the city. Really be proactive in doing that. Recognizing that in closing any facility, residents who lose that access in their immediate area may migrate to the closest facility. So in fact, staff needs may increase in those other facilities that they migrate to. As a public service, I just have 2 more points. As a public service, we should celebrate the fact that we subsidize our programs and our facilities rather than require programs to raise fees to compensate for a lack of general fund dollars. Thanks. General fund dollars are what allow us to strive to be accessible to all Portlanders and allow us to make progress on our racial equity plan. Please do not consider options that would increase fees, period, for programs, community centers, permits, parking, etc. And please do not consider options that would reduce scholarship availability. Please do not allow reductions to be made that would hinder the ability of our Bureau to continue to make progress on the racial equity plan goals. If equity is truly a value that the Bureau holds, then the budget that negatively affects this value should not be accepted. We ask for City Council to authorize creative options like early retirement incentives. And recognizing that we have continual funding sources for maintenance projects, we see a potential for mitigating any potential cuts to staff. We propose that entry-level positions be created with CIP funds, and that in place of hiring contract crews, we could hire employees who are losing their position and who are interested in being trained in a specific trade. There are many staff who would be willing to collaborate on this, and we have staff that would be willing to talk to you about that idea if you are interested. We see these entry-level positions as an apprenticeship program. Please reach out to any of us if you would like any clarifications, and I would like to concede the rest of my time to LiUNA 483, and this letter is presented on behalf of Protect 17, but also myself, Yoko Silk, and Peter Zoltansky, who is a steward with LiUNA 483, Jackie Hunter, steward with 483, and Jorge Villavicencio, also with Protect 17. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jamie Dosher. I'm a Recreation Coordinator 1 with Portland Parks and Recreation over at East Portland Pool in Aquatics. And I'm also the Vice President of Labor's Local 483. Tonight, I'm here to put into perspective what these cuts will mean to Recreation's workforce. The current cuts package will eliminate 56 FTE. That represents roughly 9% of PP&R's total workforce. However, it dives down into 32% of the entire Recreation frontline staff. If taken, these cuts will have a lasting negative impact on the workforce for years to come. In 2014, the Recreation arbitration decision led to an increase of approximately 130 new jobs. The majority of those were in the Recreation Leader classification, which is the entry-level position within Recreation. 5 years later, we can see the effects of these new positions have had on the diversity of the city's workforce. As you can see on this slide, the first 2 columns on the left show the increase in the percentage of employees of color in full-time positions from 2014 to 2019, an increase of 12%. The middle 2 columns show the increase in the percentage of women of color in full-time positions from 2014 to 2019, with an increase of 13.5%. The last 2 columns on the right show the increase in the percentage of represented employees of color from 2014 to 2019, an increase of 14%. To the best of our understanding, 41 of the positions chosen to be eliminated are rec leader positions, almost half of all the rec leader positions in the entire Bureau. Our concern is that the proposed budget cuts will reverse the progress seen on the above slide and disproportionately affect Black, brown, and other non-Black people of color, along with women. Rec leader positions act as an entry point for diverse candidates to employment with the city. I personally know a handful of coworkers that have recently moved into BOEC, so Bureau of Emergency Communication, and Portland Bureau of Transportation after having began their career or their city career as rec leaders. A cut of this magnitude is not only a loss for parks, it also eliminates a pathway to higher paying jobs for Black, brown, and other non-Black people of color, along with women workers. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jackie Hunter, and I also work for Portland Parks and Recreation as a Recreation Coordinator 1 in the Customer Service Center. The reason I moved to Oregon was Portland Parks and Recreation. I looked at Portland Parks and said this is a well-developed ecosystem providing space for community, recreation, education, and socialization of the Portlanders. We are not just a community center, or we're not just a pool, a gym, or a park. We're community centers, looking to provide something for every Portlander. By reducing our programs, facilities, and staff, we run the risk of no longer serving our community, and especially those who need us the most. We also make ourselves vulnerable. By switching to a private business-like model, such as like 24-hour fitness, we end up ineffectively competing against other companies with much larger scales of economy. Working in the customer service center, I hear our customers' frustrations when they can't get access to our services. They find themselves on wait lists within a few hours of registration dates opening. Many of our programs could serve more people if we had more instructors available, more space, or more investment in our park system. Investing in our parks program is the best solution to solving our revenue generation issues. If these cuts go through, wait lists will continue to swell to the point where our customers will look elsewhere for these services that are needed. Kids will miss out on swim lessons, preschool programs, camps, and places to have birthday parties, and more revenue will be lost. We have an example here that no matter how much care you put into creating a great program, like a hand-knit sweater, if you reduce staff, close centers, and privatize arts programs, it's like pulling the thread that unravels the sweater. Once things start to come apart, they're much, much harder to put back together. We're concerned about the proposed recreation cost recovery model that requires 50 cents of every dollar spent on recreation to be collected through fees. This is an unrealistic goal that will end up pricing out the very communities we are attempting to serve. Most of the benefits of Portland Parks and Recreation programs cannot be quantified by dollars, cents, or statistics. The mission of parks is to help Portlanders play, providing safe places, facilities, and programs which promote physical, mental, and social activities. We ask that Council invest in Portland Parks Bureau so that our mission can be achieved.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. And I just want to make sure that the slideshow is up on there for this last bit as well. So my name is Tom Collette. I'm the lead field representative with Laborers Local 43. Laborers Local 43 recently contracted with Peter Donahue of PBI Associates to investigate whether the city's overall financial condition shows resources available to mitigate the projected structural deficit in Portland Parks and Recreation. Tonight, we will share with you two preliminary findings. I want to note that all of our numbers came from the CAFR, the Consolidated Annual Financial Report, and are audited numbers, meaning they are not budget projections of what may happen, but rather are third-party verified numbers of what has happened. The first slide here shows a 5-year look back of the city's general fund revenues and expenditures. The dotted line shows the trend. Since the 13-14 fiscal year, revenues have exceeded expenditures by an average of $54 million a year. Note, too, that in none of the past years have revenues come close to expenditures or been under. The most recent fiscal year, 18-19, shows revenues over by $60 million, of which the parks deficit would equal roughly 1/10. We believe this is significant because it speaks to the possibility of greater ongoing funding being available. I think we're going to need to rewind for the next slide, because there should be a slide up there right now. Thank you.
It's up on this computer.
There we go. Thank you. So this next slide is a 5-year look back of the unrestricted net assets in the Internal Service Fund. The Internal Service Fund is the holding place for charges between bureaus. Normally, one would expect to see these charges zero out, meaning the cost of providing services from Bureau A would equal the cost paid by Bureau B for these same services. Again, the dotted line shows the trend. Since the 13-14 fiscal year, there has been on average $89 million worth of unrestricted funds. The most recent fiscal year, 18-19, shows $90 million of unrestricted cash, of which the parks deficit would be roughly 1/14. We understand that the city may be able to provide information relevant to these slides that allows us to better understand its financial condition. To that end, we're making a request. We ask that members of the City Council meet with Mr. Donahue sometime in the next 2 weeks to discuss these slides and his other findings. We request that the Chief Financial Officer be present and that before any major budget decisions are made, the Council have an opportunity to review Mr. Donahue's information. At a time when sweeping cuts to the Parks Bureau are being considered, we believe it is crucial that time be taken to explore all available resources. Now, I want to end by responding to something I've heard multiple times in conversations with different commissioners' offices, that this problem is a structural problem. In other words, that the costs will continue to outstrip the revenues beyond this fiscal year. Every bureau faces the challenge of increasing costs. Increases in PERS, COLA, step increases, and the cost of goods and services are not unique to Park. Yet only in Parks is this challenge presented as an existential threat to the Bureau. This is because for years, Parks has increased its service level, providing more and more of the services that Portlanders want without any long-term sustained investment from the council that's commensurate with the increase in service level. Stretched thin by this disinvestment and no longer able to use a service delivery model reliant on low-wage jobs, increases that other bureaus are taking in stride are creating a reconsideration of Parks' model. We believe the solution, though, is not to slash Park services and potentially put the Bureau in a revenue tailspin, but to do what should have happened years ago: invest in Portland Parks and Recreation. Many of the services slated for cuts are the very services needed to solve larger city problems. Teen Services works with at-risk youth to reduce gang involvement and decreases policing costs. Park rangers are able to interface with Portland's houseless population, mitigating conflict without the use of expensive police services. Selwood and Hillside Community Centers provide needed affordable preschool programs which the Perry Preschool Study has shown lead to lower incarceration rates, higher lifetime earnings, and greater incidence of home ownership. I could go on, but I think I've made our point. We were requesting that the council press the pause button on these budget cuts and consider its full financial resources before cutting the programs and services that Portlanders rely on and support. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a lot more testimony to get through. Thank you so much, and thank you for that enthusiasm. So far it's working that we hear, I feel like, and I could ask the mayor and the commissioners, when I see the visual, I really feel it, and I actually can count more numbers. So I want to encourage you to do that again, and if we can start going back to that. We start now with the invited testimony. And I would like to ask that if any of you who are doing the invited testimony, if you have handouts, to give them to me, and I will present them to the mayor and the commissioners. At this point, we will go into a timed piece, and my timekeeper, Elizabeth, is walking up now. We have 3 minutes for testimony for each of you who are seated at the table. If the council would like to respond, there is a small amount of time to respond to each of the speakers. There will be follow-up information from the panel may be provided as requested. What else can I, so we will give you Elizabeth will hold up a warning sign at 2 minutes when you have 1 minute left.
Excuse me, it's my understanding that the next two speakers have 10 minutes together, the East Portland speakers, that we are not restricted to 3 minutes?
Who are we talking about? Linda Robinson and Natalie Rush?
The East Portland speakers.
Yes, that's
okay,
correct.
That is correct? Okay,
Correct.
Thank you. So before we go into the 3 minute one, I just heard something in my ear, you might have heard it too, that you two will have 10 minutes total, is that correct? Okay, and then we'll go into the 3 minute one?
Correct.
Okay, and so we'll give you a 2-minute warning at 8 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm Natalie Rush. Oops. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. With East Portland, excuse me. So Portland Parks Land Stewardship Division has 148 developed parks that does not include the natural areas. The East Services Zone has 50 of these in its portfolio. Of the 148 park sites, there are 3,000 acres of land to manage. Out of the 3,000 acres for the East Service Zone to take care of, they are responsible for 1,300, which is 43%. 10 of these sites are considered land banked and receive no funding for maintenance except for tall grass. 2 of these sites will have brand new playgrounds built with no maintenance funding to support them. The East Service Zone operates 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The staff includes 1 maintenance supervisor, 2 horticulturalists, 7 park technicians on day shift, and at this time there is 1 swing shift that is currently vacant due to hiring freeze. 5 seasonal maintenance workers that work peak seasons, this is April through September, equals 10 full-time and 5 part-time workers taking care of 50 sites or 1,300 acres or 43%. The boundaries, well actually, let me look over there. Okay, due to affordable housing issues, the East Portland is home to the most diverse and underserved families that live in the city of Portland, including many immigrant and refugee families. The current Parks Improvement Bond identified these projects in East Portland with the goal to close the current gaps in equity opportunities. But in short, the proposal to eliminate almost $400,000 of the operations and maintenance funding that was set aside to maintain the new assets built in East Portland are unsustainable and cancels out any gains that would have been made regarding equity.
Okay, my name is Linda Robinson, and thank you for inviting me to talk about East Portland Parks. For those of you who don't know me, I've been active in the East Portland Parks Coalition since it was formed in 2002. In the past, I've served for several years on both the Parks Board and the Parks Budget Advisory Committee. More than 45 years ago, I moved to what was then known as unincorporated Mid-County. My advocacy for parks began in the 1980s when the area became East Portland and has continued to this day. I know many of you are aware of the infrastructure needs in East Portland, but a quick review will help explain the primary concerns that I have about the requested budget and about the City Budget Office's analysis of it. East Portland, sometimes defined as east of 82nd or east of I-205, makes up about 20% of the city's landmass. It houses almost 25% of the city's residents and about 1/3 of its school-aged children. Considerable progress has been made in recent years, and we thank you for that, but East Portland continues to have significant infrastructure needs. As noted in the East Portland Action Plan that was adopted 10 years ago, East Portland has been transitioning from a suburban and semi-rural form to an increasingly urban form, a fact that brings both benefits and challenges. Existing infrastructure and services, which were already less than in the rest of the city, have been seriously strained. They have not kept up with demand. The demographics of the area are also changing. The area is increasingly diverse, the most diverse part of the city. It's home to immigrants and refugees from all over the world. The numbers vary from year to year, but they always seem to hover around 70 different languages are spoken in the homes of the children who attend the Park Rose and David Douglas schools. In addition, a high percentage of East Portland residents live in poverty. Therefore, they must rely on public spaces for recreation, entertainment, and getting together with family and friends. Yet there is a shortage of any kind of gathering spaces in East Portland. Clearly, the needs are great. So we applaud the progress the city has made to address the lack of park infrastructure. At the time of annexation, the city inherited a few parks, most of them small and undeveloped. In year 2000, the city began purchasing land for parks, including several large parcels. Master plans have been developed for a few of those, and a couple of them have actually been developed into good functioning, full functioning parks. There is, however, much work still to be done to bring parity to East Portland. This brings me back to the requested budget for 2019-2020 and the city budget office's analysis of it. I want to call your attention to one particular item in the requested budget, one that few are aware of and that many do not understand, and one that could have dramatic negative impacts in East Portland and on the city's equity goals. So bear with me while I try to explain why this concerns me. Typically, the budget process starts with the previous year's budget, an inflation factor is added, then ongoing O&M, that's operations and maintenance, is added for any new assets that have been completed and or are under construction and will need operation funds the next year. This becomes the base budget. Only then do bureaus start considering what to add or cut. At least that's the way the process has worked for many years. While there may be some negotiation as to how much operation and maintenance money is added for the new assets, the need for it has always been a given. I realize that the budget process has changed this year, with every bureau required to build a new budget line by line. It was this new approach, coupled with a fresh look by our new Parks Finance Manager and the new Parks Director, that revealed the $6.3 million budget deficit. Given this, Parks was given additional time to prepare a revised requested budget. Both the original budget and the revised budget include an item of $891,000, a request for ongoing O&M for 38 new park assets. While some of these are relatively small acquisitions or projects, some are quite significant. When the City Budget Office analyzed the initial parks budget, it recommended do not fund for this $891,000 item. This recommendation is alarming because of the precedent it was set and the immediate impact on new facilities. The Budget Office's analysis essentially said that the practice of automatically adding ongoing O&M for new assets should not be allowed, that it puts City Council in a difficult position of suddenly being faced with a strong pressure to fund new expenses that they didn't anticipate. The Budget Office argues that City Council should have more to say about new projects long before the actual construction contracts come to Council for approval. And I understand this position. However, there is some warning, at least for some of the larger projects, because Parks puts those O&M anticipated needs into the 5-year budget forecast. Perhaps that's not enough, and perhaps it's not tied closely enough to the annual budget process so that they know what's kind of coming ahead. So the City Budget Office document suggests that a policy be developed on how to better anticipate these new expenses. But what that will require, that should involve much more discussion and analysis before such a change in policy is adopted. And if it is changed, it should be phased in, not suddenly changed for projects that are already completed or already in the construction process. Denying ongoing O&M requests for these new park assets is like building a Wapato jail and never allocating any money to operate it. This results in great expense and virtually no benefit to the taxpayers. We've seen that happen. What new assets are we talking about in this budget cycle? Well, some of the 38 projects, 4 are new community gardens, including one that's being built right here at David Douglas High School and will open on June 6th. New playgrounds and replacement of selected portions of other playgrounds, new bridges, one in Forest Park, another on the Springwater, renovated restrooms, one new restroom, new urban forestry building. So I was not surprised to learn that more than 45% of these requested funds are for new projects in East Portland. And the largest item on the list is Gateway Green, $173,000 for maintenance of this new park. As many of you know, I have spent the last decade or more advocating and raising money for this park, and I'm crushed by the prospect that there may not be any money to run it once it's built. It would be unconscionable to make this sudden change just as the city is finally addressing park inequities in East Portland Which brings me to another troubling recommendation by the City Budget Office, that Portland Park should curtail most, if not all, spending of park SDC funds. These system development charges are collected from developers in order to provide more services that will be required by the new development. Essentially, the Budget Office is reiterating a position that East Portland residents have heard many times since acquisition. Protect what you have, don't build anything new. The analysis went so far as to suggest that they change the formula for calculating SDC funds so they wouldn't collect as much, and then they wouldn't have to worry about how to spend it. So, my response to this is, well, that's fine and dandy if you live in the part of the city that has adequate infrastructure, adequate parks. But if you live where there aren't any parks, where it's very limited, you're kind of left out. There needs to be a balanced approach. Finding the balance can be tricky, I agree, but the city has to make an effort to do that, to find that balance. Finally, City Council is not obliged to adopt any of the Budget Office recommendations. So why am I making such a fuss about this? Because it would be a terrible precedent to set. And it's a big change in the established policy of automatically putting that O&M money in. And it also affects the way the Bureau addresses its equity goals. So I urge the City Council to fund the $891,000 request for ongoing O&M for this whole list of 38 projects, and to diligently seek a sustainable balance between taking care of what we have and building new facilities for those that don't have. If finding new sources is needed to do that, then let's work together to develop those new sources. It's the equitable thing to do.
Thank you. Now, we'll begin by going around the table, and again, 3 minutes. You'll get the 1 minute signal and then the time. And if you have handouts, please give them to me, and I will give them out. And we will start out with Joanne Harrigal.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council and members of the community, my name is Joanne Harrigal. I am the Deputy Director with Elders in Action. We're a small nonprofit in Southwest Portland that educates, advocates for, and serves older adults in the Portland metro area. The active engagement of older adult volunteers is at the heart of what we do at Elders in Action. First, because we are a staff of 8, and without the 125 volunteers that we have, we wouldn't be able to do half of the things that we do now. Secondly, and most importantly, volunteering has been shown to have a positive impact on people's mental and physical well-being and to decrease isolation. For over 100,000 Portland residents aged 60 plus, avoiding isolation, staying active, and engaging in social activities is imperative. Evidence suggests that physical activity is associated with more years of life, higher number of years without physical impairment, reduced risk of type 2 diabetes, and better quality of life in general. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention notes that the loss of strength and stamina attributed to aging is in part caused by reduced physical activity. Their recommendations for what communities should do to encourage physical activity among seniors includes the following: providing community-based physical activity programs that offer aerobic, strengthening, and flexibility components specifically designed for older adults. Second, ensuring that facilities for physical activity accommodate and encourage participation by older adults. And finally, providing transportation for older adults to parks or facilities that provide physical activity programs. The City of Portland has a long history of commitment to recreational, educational, and wellness opportunities for adults aged 60 and above. Your senior program staff of 3 is able to leverage the equivalent of 5 FTEs in volunteer time. Even with the level of funding you are currently recommending, which is very positive, thank you, it sounds like one-half FTE of paid staff will need to be cut, jeopardizing the senior hiking program that attracts 300 people a year. Combined with the services provided by government and nonprofit agencies in the area, we have created a strong patchwork of support for our aging and diversifying older adult population. Elders in Action supports your continued funding for these important programs. Thank you.
And now we'll hear from Jeremy Robbins.
My name is Jeremy Robbins, and I'm here representing the Portland Access and Advisory Committee. And so what we do is we look at current and capital projects that are going on within the park system and what's going on with physical access. I have an intimate connection to Portland Parks and Rec. 20 years ago, I broke my neck in Thompson Park in a bicycling accident. I learned how to swim again at the Dishman Community Center, and I ride my hand cycle out at PIR. All of these spaces are amazing for people with disabilities because we're able to get back into the community in ways that we're not usually able to do. The thought of losing long-term funding for the sustainability of these parks is pretty terrifying. I most recently worked on getting Gateway Green as accessible as possible, and it was quite a project. The thought that the work that I did for that, again, I'm a volunteer. I don't get paid for any of this. Will go by the wayside because it's not able to be maintained is just a travesty. I just encourage the council to think about the fact that there's a huge disabled population, both physical and not visible disabilities that are going to really be impacted by the budget deficit both this year and in the long term. I thank you for letting me talk today.
Thank you. Next, Mary Margaret Wheeler-Weber.
Hi. Good evening. Thank you for having me here. My name is Mary Margaret Wheeler-Weber, and I live in the Portsmouth neighborhood, about a half mile from Columbia Pool. And like many of my neighbors, I've used the pool with generations of my family over many years. I'm also vice chair of the Portsmouth Neighborhood Association and one of a number of neighbors who've come together over the last several weeks in response to the proposal to close Columbia Pool in July of 2020. There's a lot of us, and I wish I could say that we've reached a significant number of people who will be impacted by this, but we've really just started because of the timeline. I know you've already heard public testimony about the pool, council members, so you know that it's used by people of all ages and abilities, including swim teams, athletes, children and elders, and people using mobility devices. The water is warm and welcoming from people, to people from around the North Portland Peninsula and beyond. But Portsmouth is its home, and our neighborhood is among the most diverse in Portland. We're proud to be home to New Columbia, which I believe is still Oregon's largest public housing complex. And the investments made there protect our community to a certain extent from the impact of gentrification. It also means that some of our neighbors are vulnerable and continue to be underserved. 35% of our neighbors live at or below the poverty line. This is versus 16% for the city of Portland as a whole. 45% are people of color, 48% are renters. Students at Rosa Parks Elementary School in the heart of our neighborhood come from over 20 different countries, and over 90% of students there are eligible for free or reduced lunch. And I believe this is still the highest rate in Portland Public Schools. Our community is diverse, beautiful, and strong, but many haven't had equitable access to resources that support good health over the years. And the pool is one of the resources that we have had. Now, we understand that Portland leaders strive to include an equity lens in their decision-making, and this, my understanding of the term, means to work against the impact of structural racism and consider who has had less and often paid more in the past. And we know then that it's important for you to know just who's going to be impacted by the pool closure. Now, we're thankful that the parks budget includes funds to keep Columbia Pool open for this year. And Commissioner Fish, we embrace your offer to participate in planning what comes next, and our main question is, when can we meet and what can we do? We've also been asked in the last week or so for community support to build a pool at Charles Jordan Center. I personally, and this is just myself, I personally believe we can build that support, but it's very challenging when we have so little information, and we have had so little information. Many in the community fear that the Charles Jordan proposal is a red herring intended to divide us instead of focusing on the common goal of uninterrupted access to good and appropriate swim facilities. And really, the lack of transparency, I know that we're all working on crazy timelines, but it doesn't help. Really?
You can finish your last thought there.
Okay. Building the pool at Charles Jordan would take at least 5 years, according to the estimates I've read. And as neighbors, we agree on one thing: keep our pool access uninterrupted. We also have a lot of other questions about the Charles Jordans. But finally, there's the bigger question: should we as Portlanders accept cuts to services that support the health and welfare of the most vulnerable people in our communities at a time when the city is growing? And why are we competing against one another for scant resources? We've also heard rumors, and again, we don't have a lot of information, about a parks district. We're anxious to learn more about this and any other solutions. And in the meantime, we look for your leadership, and we just ask, when can we meet and how can we help? Thank you.
Sure, please.
Thank you very much for that presentation, and I know that Commissioner Fish is going to give some more information on the plans for Columbia Pool and the plans for Charles Jordan. So that we heard in the presentation that there's about $5 million of maintenance that's needed there, and that's not counting the unreinforced masonry and the 100-year-old buildings. So I agree, keeping it open as long as possible until the other one is a good thing. Many of you supported the $68 million Fix Our Parks bond, and you may remember that one of the projects there was fixing Grant Pool, which is of a similar age, 100 years old, and that was kind of one of the places we visited to do the ads for that campaign, and they took us underneath to where the mechanical system was, and it was oozing this kind of brownish green stuff, and the engineer said that she didn't dare take it apart because she didn't think it would go back together again, and the parts were not made, they're not made anymore. So I just wanted to be very clear that should something go wrong with the mechanical system, or the roof I know is something that needs to be fixed, that would put a damper in the case of the roof about the ability to keep it running. And still, Commissioner, did you want to wait till the end to get to talk about your plans for? Actually,
Mary Margaret and I have had we've had some preliminary conversations about things we're going to do going forward with other folks from
So you might be thinking of
advocacy community. And my goal tonight is to take in as much information as possible and to have follow-up conversations.
Okay, but I just wanted to put out there that yes, we are hearing all of these comments, and there are some, and yes, we want to work with you to find solutions. And so I don't want to move off this topic in particular, since I've received a lot of information about it without giving you my perspective of both support but if it fails, I think we'd all agree that if we're not going to keep it going long term, it wouldn't make any sense to fix it.
Thank you.
Maybe not.
Kathleen Madden.
Good evening, Mayor Wheeler, Commissioners Fritz, Hardesty, and our Commissioner Fish, and fellow citizens. Gordon and I are here tonight asking you for bridge funding to develop a sustainable business model for the Multnomah Arts Center, excuse me, ensuring the future of this vital community resource. We are a public, affordable arts space. MEC is key to realizing the city's affordable arts plan. To attract displaced arts organizations, we plan a capital campaign to generate more revenue by renovating our theater and dance studios. MAC is not only about art. 10 nonprofits are housed there, including Sweeney, the umbrella organization for several neighborhood associations, and Neighborhood House, which provides senior services. During my 12 years working at MAC, I've seen a group of differently abled adults sing their hearts out each Saturday. Celebrations of births and lives, bat and bar mitzvahs, so many celebrations. Multnomah Arts Center is truly a community gathering space. I'm proud to continue my work at MAC as a board member because I've seen how art changes lives. Our mission statement aligns with the city's core equity value and informs every action we take. And I quote, to advocate for equity and access to arts education. Gordon?
How will the Arts Center support the park's 5-year racial equity plan? In 4 ways. First, our leaders who identify as white will dedicate ourselves to the humbling and lifelong education needed to confront implicit bias and white supremacy. Formal in-services have begun. We've changed our mission statement, and our staff at the center has organized themselves into an equity group, and more people have been hired as benefited staff. Second, we host a nationally recognized third space, a distinct from home and workplace, where last year 68,000 Portlanders from many backgrounds, abilities, and ages met and mixed exactly the soil needed to plant and grow a more colorful and welcoming city. Third, we engage underserved and low-income families, bringing art experiences to them at Holly Farm and Stevens Creek Crossing through Summer Free-for-All and through generous need-based scholarships. And fourth, our public events celebrate diversity. We sponsor the August Wilson Red Door Project show, Hands Up, in our auditorium, and in our monthly gallery exhibits, Migration Stories narrates the journey of local refugees and immigrants. And this June, artists from several gender identities will exhibit at our Pride show. Our much-loved, much-used Public Arts Center needs your vision to help us pivot to a new business model, more sustainable and more equitable, more innovative and more inclusive. Thank you for your investment.
Gordon, it's not my intent to jump in and say much tonight, but I did want the public that's tracking this to understand that we have a $3.2 million one-time ask in this budget. You heard that figure when Adina laid out the budget. That $3.2 million is designed to give us some breathing room to do some hard work. And just in the last 2 excellent presentations we've had, just to put a finer point on it, that $3.2 million would allow us to keep Columbia Pool open for a year and to explore lots of options and have conversations about potentially an aquatic center at Charles Jordan. That $3.2 million, if the council agrees to fund it, I mean, I'm advocating, but if we get the money, would give us a year and a half to sit down with our friends at Multnomah Arts Center and talk about a 20-year vision. So understand that as bad as the news is on one side of the ledger in terms of what we are required to propose, we are asking for one-time resources. And you saw up on that big screen that there could be as much as $14 million in one-time resources. We're asking for $3.2 million to have a softer landing so we have the time to have these long-term discussions about treasured partners. So I just want to put that into context. And thank you both for your presentation.
Thank you. Kathy Schroeder.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Fish, because I'm from the Community Music Center and we're in the same one-time transition fund. Correct. So Mayor Wheeler and commissioners, thanks for your time today listening to the community. I'm Kathy Schroeder. I'm a volunteer board member and vice president at the nonprofit Community Music Center, which is a longtime park friend and partner of the Parks program called the Community Music Center. And so yes, you're right, we have the same names, but we're completely different entities. The nonprofit has supported and financially subsidized the music programming at the Community Music Center and around the city since 1955. So for the reasons I will outline, the nonprofit encourages the city to support the proposed one-time transition funding for CMC. Through the city nonprofit partnership, affordable music lessons and classes, free and low-cost concerts and low-cost instrument rentals have been a reality for thousands of ever-increasingly diverse youth, adults, and seniors. Over 45 professional performing artist teachers teach for the Community Music Center. In 2018 alone, CMC provided over 400 free mini music lessons in 2 East Portland parks as part of the Summer Free-for-All lunch and play program. Over 6,000 private lessons and 3,000 group classes were programmed in 2018 for students from an ever-widening list of zip codes beyond inner Southeast and Southwest Portland. The program granted up to 90% tuition assistance for almost 200 students taking weekly lessons and classes, and also in 2018, over 8,000 people enjoyed high-quality live music at 140 free or low-cost concerts. And CMC partnered with the Rosewood Initiative, an East Portland Community Center, to provide local youth with free, full scholarship, high-quality private music lessons the past 2 years. In the Parks Community Needs Survey of 2017, Portlanders prioritized the importance of music lessons in the top third of Parks activities, above camps, preschool, and even sports. Additionally, many studies have found that music education, even at a basic level, improves performance in school, reduces drug use, increases participation in exercise and in one's community. And the music scene in Portland is recognized nationally as a hub of diverse, exceptional talent. The dedication of the city to arts and music with support from partners like CMC has helped make this happen. The nonprofit has raised money to support exceptional music education for decades, but it's difficult to get individuals and institutional donors to donate to analysis, feasibility, and sustainability. The city budget proposal for this one-time transition funding to explore and developing an ongoing sustainable model will strengthen the city's values for equity and financial stability and continue to bring music to Portland's well-tuned ears. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gail Hofnagel. Oh, Sally Bowman, excuse me, Sally Bowman.
Hi, good evening.
We're having trouble hearing you.
Okay, let's bring this in. I'm here representing Laurelhurst Dance School, and my history with them is fairly brief, only 6 years of my daughter taking dance lessons there. The reason I chose Laurelhurst for a dance school for my daughter was because it was Portland Parks and Rec, and I recognized that you guys have a really great program. And it was also in my budget, which it would have been completely out of reach to put my daughter into any kind of dance because I have 4 kids. And, you know, it's one of those things. I really wanted her to be able to do something fun. And also, the teachers there are professionals. They are chosen specifically because they are dance professionals. The program is amazing, and the facility is specifically for dance. I believe it's the only entirely devoted dance studio in the Portland Parks, and it's entirely dedicated to dance. There is not, there's not music there. They do have some exercise programs, but it's all dance. It's a dance studio for dancing, and they have the Marley floor, which you won't find in a community center. It's made for dancing. So from what I understand, they've been talking about partnering with an outside dance company or someone else to come in and take over the dance studio and maybe teach programs there rather than having the Parks Department run the program. And currently we have a wonderful person there that runs our program. She is amazing, and I would hate to see her lose her job when she's doing an excellent job. And sorry, I would hate to see my daughter lose the dance studio that she's been going to since she was 4. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Now Gail Hofnagel.
Thank you. I'm Gail Hofnagel, the Vice President of SMILE and the Chair of the Friends of Selleck Community Center. Last Tuesday, you heard both adults and children speak with eloquence and passion about the importance of our community centers in their lives. Those voices, together with the hundreds of emails, letters, cards from kids, and petitions you have received underscores the widespread support for Selwood Community Center as well as other recreation facilities in Portland. We, you as city officials, and us as residents of a community where vital services are being cut, share a significant problem. You have a budget before you that has been unsustainable for years. Huge sums of money are being spent on new projects while maintenance of current parks and community assets are being neglected. Once again, Selwood Community Center is a victim of this budgeting system. SMILE wants to work with you to find a long-term solution to this problem that we have faced annually for far too many years. It is clear that there are no simple solutions, but there are options. One idea, we need to look no farther than Seattle, where voters overwhelmingly approved the creation of the Seattle Parks District in 2014 in the midst of a $287 million maintenance backlog. Their efforts are paying off. They have 27 community centers, with their goal of having one community center within a mile of every resident of Seattle. In contrast, the Portland Park Bureau has a goal to have one center within a 4-mile radius. Last year it was a 3-mile radius, that will make it virtually impossible for many residents to get to centers due to travel time, inconvenience, and the difficulty using public transportation. This model is also completely inconsistent with the 20-minute walkable neighborhood initiative. In addition, many Park Bureau programs are becoming unaffordable. Why not look at the Seattle model and see if their model can help us out? While we work together on a long-term solution, short-term bridge funding will be critical to help our communities engaged and prevent the interruption of vital services. Perhaps this year, the emergency fund should be used to cover the cost of keeping programs open. Finally, the census demographic statistics we are currently using are 10 years old. Before we make changes to our inventory, let's wait until the 2020 census is finished. We've all witnessed the growth and expansion of our city and neighborhoods. If we strive for equitable, inclusive, accessible park systems, we will need more services, not less. We are asking for a long-term, sustainable fix to our fundamental funding problem with a short-term bridge in place to strengthen our communities and our city. SMILE continues to hope for a response to our request for a meeting to begin the process of finding a collaborative solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Gary Berger.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening. My name is Gary Berger. I've been on the Hillside Neighborhood Association for 26 years, and I'm representing not only Hillside, but the children, parents, and athletes from Portland who use and count on the Hillside Community Center. By the way, I thought I had 5 minutes, so hold on. Last year, the city authorized several studies relating to parks finances that would enable thoughtful and equitable changes to PPNR's revenue model. It's unwise to make huge cuts without incorporating the results of these studies. If the city cannot find additional revenue for the budget cycle, please tap emergency funds to cover the cost of keeping Hillside and other centers open until next year. Don't rush significant cuts that will be difficult to undo. Please take the time to find the revenue to support PPNR. We suggest a parks levy. New ongoing city revenue, like council found for last year's new police positions, dedicating spring and fall BMP funds to restore emergency funds and PERS cost increases, perhaps a parks district. The proposed changes, as Parks has readily admitted, is simply an acceleration of a death spiral of cuts, jobs losses, reduced services, less revenue, more cuts. Specifically about Hillside, Mr. Mayor, you were kind enough to come and visit us last year where you said the community centers would not be closed during your term in office. We believed words matter, and we believe actions matter even more. Hillside is the only center located in Northwest Portland or downtown It is 7 miles from the centers suggested by Parks, which are in North Portland and Southwest Portland, 7 miles away. Too far and extremely impractical for those living in Northwest Portland. Hillside, I'll leave that. The center is packed throughout the week with preschool, youth, adult, recreation events. Closing the center would save the city some money, but would cost a tremendous impact to the community. The center has no significant deferred maintenance expenses. You were there, I think you found it to be a beautiful facility. Well, it's just a great facility. Having the building sit empty is unacceptable, and we believe it would be a breach of contract. The Hillside Community Center land and buildings were purchased by the neighborhood in the 70s, and after a multi-year funding campaign, the site was improved by the community as required by the city before giving it to the city in April of '74. The transfer of title contained the covenant. The above described real estate will be used only for the purposes of a public park and recreation center. If you need copies of the documents, I have them for you. As a result, the current proposal is ostensibly not to close Hillside, but to lease it to a private operator. No one has yet identified a viable operator to lease Hillside. It's unlikely one could afford the facility. The Parks funding is, if Parks funding is pulled from Hillside, closure seems the most likely outcome, and per our agreement, that is unacceptable. Thank you.
And Lindsay Grizel.
Good evening. I thank you for the opportunity to speak today on the behalf of the Contra Dance community. We are one of the groups that rent the Fulton Community Center building. I personally feel very strongly that Portland Parks and Rec should be funding all of our community centers. At a time when our city is becoming ever more densely populated, we need every available space for people to gather in pursuit of exercise, education, childcare, and social interaction. But today I am here to speak specifically in support of the Fulton Park building. Fulton is not a community center. It has been a rental-only building since 2012. There are no parks programs or services, and there is no parks staff. But there are recreational activities going on at Fulton without parks needing to provide any supervision, operation, or subsidy. For over 30 years, we have had between 80 and 160 people contra dancing at Fulton every Saturday night. This is not a neighborhood activity. People come from all parts of the city. In fact, they come from 26 different zip codes we've counted. This is the 5th time that we have had to fight to save our space at Fulton. We have been looking for a replacement for 16 years. We have a list of over 120 halls that we have investigated and know will not work. We can't just drive to another community center. There are no other spaces that can hold 160 people dancing every Saturday night. Our dances are run entirely by volunteers. We utilize a sliding scale admission policy to cover the rental costs, which allows people of all income levels to attend. Our diverse community includes a broad spectrum of economic status, culture, sexual orientation, people with disability, and age. We have 11-year-olds dancing with 80-year-olds. Unlike other dance forms, contra dancing at Fulton is highly accessible. You can walk in right off the street and join in. An extensive 21-year scientific study published in the New England Journal of Medicine showed that only social dancing was effective at lowering the risk of dementia. As is appropriate, Portland Parks and Rec supports almost every kind of physical exercise, so why not dancing? We understand that Parks is attempting to negotiate a master lease for the Fulton building with a single entity. We certainly hope that all existing users will continue to be able to use the Fulton facility under this agreement. If that is the case, we're in favor of this proposal, but we know that sometimes negotiations fall through. We realize Fulton is a small detail in a large city budget. We ask you to pay attention and don't let Fulton be boarded up and sold to a developer. Just let us keep paying the rent. Don't close this unique building that provides recreation and community for the entire city of Portland. Thank you.
Lindsay, can I want to make a public promise to you. There will not be a scenario where this building is sold to a Portland developer under any of the options. But the plan that you referenced at the end with a long-term lease with the French Immersion School, which has at least preliminarily proposed to pay for the capital maintenance of the building in lieu of rent, which would mean that the building would be maintained, with the proviso that the contra dancers and others would continue to have the access they currently enjoy to the dance floors and would have that access negotiated by the city as part of a contract. That's a potential win-win-win. I'm pleased that you referenced it. We will engage you in those discussions, and that's the kind of creative partnership that we're looking for in a situation like this. But I can assure you, after many years of having the contra dancers come out and show their strength in numbers at these forums, we're working diligently to make sure that they continue to have access to that dance facility, except in a model that's going to ensure that the building is better cared for going forward.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
I have closing remarks, but go first.
Commissioner Fish.
Mayor, I'd like to just make a few closing comments if I could. At some point, we'll ask for your feedback, those of you who are here tonight, whether this modified budget work session format was a plus, a minus, or a wash. I will tell you as a commissioner, sitting here and listening to invited testimony and the very thoughtful testimony we got was, I thought, more useful than having a lottery-based system where there's the risk that people won't get heard or may get pushed off to a future forum. So let us know what you think, because this is a hybrid model that's for the first time been tested tonight. And if you like it, please let the budget office know. If you hate it, let us know. But I think there was a lot tonight to like, and particularly we had a chance in a thoughtful setting to listen to each of the partners that are most impacted by our budget make a pitch. Make a pitch for reconsideration, make a pitch for an alternative approach, make a pitch for bridge funding, or whatever it was, or a new model, or an assurance that we wouldn't go off the deep end. And so I want to say that this commissioner found this modified budget work session helpful in this format. But more importantly, it's what do you think? This would not have happened without a lot of people's work, and I want to just acknowledge first, two people on my team, Todd Lofgren and Sonia Schmansky. If you could just raise your hand, I want to thank them for their work. I want to thank the Parks leadership team headed by Adina Long. I want to thank the Parks advisory boards, labor partners, and all of our community partners that really, as you can tell from the quality of the presentations tonight, Linda Robinson has been up for 5 nights in a row writing that speech. Our labor partners came armed with a PowerPoint, for God's sake. People put time and energy into making their case, and we should be grateful. But I especially want to thank the Council Budget Office. Can we give the beleaguered Council Budget Office a round of applause? Because they organize these events for us, and there's a lot of folks behind the scenes that you don't see that make sure that you're welcome, and there's snacks, and that we are on TV, and that there's follow-up, and so we're grateful for that. I want to thank all my colleagues who have shared their views of how this night could be successful, and either individually or through staff have kibitzed. We appreciate it. It's a work in progress. Again, is this something we want to continue or not? That's for the group to decide. I found a lot of merit to this format. A special thank you to our invited guests. What a group of people. I mean, it on some level breaks my heart that we're here talking about making these tough choices, because you're the reason we have a gold medal system. Your advocacy over the years, your volunteer hours, your passion for this system. You are our great community resource. And I regret that we are once again in this conversation about how to allocate the pain rather than talking about a long-term vision of how we fund our system. But I am actually encouraged from what I'm hearing from the community that we're going to pivot to that longer-term conversation. We can't keep having these conversations. It's not dignified, it's not going to serve us well, and what we keep learning every year loud and clear is that Portlanders love their park system, and they want it funded at an adequate level. So thanks to our invited guests, and how about a special shout out to all the folks who took time tonight and are sitting in the audience. They weren't here to speak, but they were here to support. And Thank you. From the city employees to the contra dancers to the folks from every part of our city that are here to make their voices heard, or at least their hands seen. Thank you. Thank you. And let me close by saying we have a short-term problem that we have to address. We have a long-term opportunity. Help us do both. Help us get through this short-term problem, but then let's start imagining a long-term plan where we get the kind of parks services and the park system that that Portlanders deserve. And we figure out a way to pay for that so we don't go through this exercise every single year. I'm grateful for everyone's great work tonight, and Mayor, it's a night like tonight, I'm especially proud to be a Portlander. Thank you. Pardon me?
Before you go.
Oh, and at the very back of the wall, back of the room, there's a wall for comments. If you haven't had a chance to put a comment up and you haven't had a chance to speak tonight, would you please take a moment just to put a card up, because they all will be tallied and they will be part of what we take away from tonight. So it's in the back of the room. Please take a moment to fill out a card and post it. And with that, Mayor, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. We're adjourned.
Okay, I was just going to remind you that the next meeting is May 9th. And so, yes, you are invited to give online or in testimony on May 9th. And I think you said everything else I was going to. Thank you. Oh.